Even those at the very highest levels of the intelligence committees, those members have been really frustrated from the beginning of this episode because several of them have told us they are either not getting the information. Most truly believed up until yesterday that the White House and several agencies that handle national security simply didn't know what these things were. Now we have a bit more information overnight from the White House and from all of our national security and defense agencies together, putting out a joint statement. So this is the Pentagon, the FBI, the FAA, and Homeland Security all together saying here, quote, "We assess the sightings to date include a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, and STARS, mistakenly reported as drones." And it goes on to say, "We have not identified anything anomalous and do not assess that the activity to date presents a national security or public safety risk." So in other words, nothing to see here. Despite that, you can imagine there are still a lot of people who observed these things on the ground, who described seeing these things the size of cars or bigger. Even lawmakers all saying that explanation they just got doesn't exactly quiet their concerns. Still a lot of skepticism from several lawmakers here on Capitol Hill. Just take a listen to Chris Smith. He's a congressman. He's a Republican from New Jersey. He says, describing his district in New Jersey, that his law enforcement, his military members there, he's got a base there, have all seen these things do strange things, in some cases even follow Coast Guard boats in his district. So the explanation that he got, he's not exactly buying. Take a listen.
Many law enforcement people have seen it. They've seen it in a way that suggests formations that are coming off the ocean into the land. And even with the Coast Guard, I spoke to one of the commanders who said one of our 47-foot rescue boats, right on its stern, were between 12 and 30 drones following close proximity. No idea who they were.
There is a planned classified briefing for the House Intelligence Committee. Obviously, it's classified, so we won't know what is said inside of that private room. Lawmakers will come out after those kinds of briefings, characterize it. How did you feel? Did you get answers that satisfied you?
So, I've had the privilege of interacting with a lot of government organizations over the past few years as I've been digging down this rabbit hole. Law enforcement at a federal level, DOD, executive branch, legislative branch, and some of the folks that I've come in contact with, they specifically work on weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so that's their job. So if there's a loose nuke in the United States, among other agencies, they would be some of the people that would be sitting in a skiff for 24 hours a day trying to figure out where it is and to go get it, right? You can imagine that would be their number one priority, right? So I engage with these folks. I ask them, what's the sense here? People are kind of starting to panic a little bit, and this message is getting out there more and more broadly. And they assured me that's not the case, that there is not a loose nuke or other type of weapon of mass destruction that these objects, whatever they are pursuing right now. Otherwise, they would be working in a skiff nonstop to make that go away, that problem go away. So, that's part of why I have a high confidence level that this is not a response to a massive imminent weapons of mass destruction threat on the eastern seaboard. So I just want to try to dispel that rumor right now. I've seen a lot of talk of that online, and I don't, although this is I think a dangerous and scary situation that's going on right now, at least from that particular angle, that's not the indications I'm receiving.
So how would they persuaded you? Just by saying that's not the case? Or have they given you any information that leads to this conclusion?
They would be the people actively working it, essentially, right? So,
and they're not
working it, right? So either the government is holding back that secret from the direct resources within the government that are responsible for finding these systems, or they're not working the issue because there isn't an issue there to work.
So the thing that I had heard was that it was a missing nuke from Ukraine.
Other information, that's what leads me to believe that's not the case. Kind of the word on the street is that these objects appear to be coming from over the ocean. There's senior congressmen, there's Coast Guard personnel, there's law enforcement. They're seeing a large number of these come from somewhere over the ocean. I don't know if that means necessarily they're popping out of the water physically, or if they're coming from some unknown location in the water and then proceeding over the coast. I don't know how that relates to Ohio. That's a pretty long trip. if they are coming over the ocean. They are flying very low. In some cases, they seem to be operating as a group in the vicinity of each other, flying past each other, flying very up close to each other, and then proceeding to do whatever they are that they're doing. It's an unknown right now if they are emitting energy or not. So, like radio communications or their own maybe active sensor systems. It's unknown. I've poked on that front, and the best I can tell, the government doesn't know either.
That seems so weird that they don't know that. That's interesting. So is the signature management so is it a heat signature that they're giving off? So maybe there's some sort of a cooling mechanism inside of these things? Like how, if they have a propulsion system, so you would imagine it's some sort of an electric engine, right? Because a lot of them are very quiet. That's got to be giving off some kind of heat, right?
Yeah, and that goes to some like very base physics, right? Like we create heat whenever we have, stored energy and we utilize it. So to be able to mitigate that to such a degree that you can't even detect them at all, it's pretty tough. I mean, I can imagine you can reduce your signature. We do it in fighter jets, right? Through kind of just like baffles where we cover the engine essentially to make it harder to see. But to have zero ability to detect or lock onto these objects is not a technology I'm familiar with.
Are they exhibiting any type of movement that's extraordinary, or their ability to turn angles? Is there anything about them that points to this being superior technology?
It's tough to say based on what I've seen just in the public from reports and kind of amateur photographers and witnesses. Some of them do seem to be making pretty sharp turns. I wouldn't call them like physics breaking turns, but they don't seem to be operating like a normal aircraft, right? So they're down low, they're making what appear to be pretty high G turns, maybe like 3, 4, 5 G turns at relatively low air speeds, which is indicative of them having a pretty significant power supply, right? Anytime you turn like that, you're burning energy essentially. So for them to be able to make these high G maneuvers and then remain in the area for another 5 or 6 or 7 hours and still have the battery life or whatever's propelling them, to then go over the ocean to a point where they're untrackable, again, I'm not really familiar with that type of capability either. So there's some laws in this country that are a little bit antiquated when it comes to dealing with situations like this. So my understanding is right now these things are operating mostly in what's called Class G airspace, which is really low. It's away from airports. Not all, of course, right? They're over bases. So
they're over LaGuardia.
Yeah. But here's I think where a lot of the trouble's coming in from. I think the government has to make the presumption at this point, based off the feedback from the DoD and others, that if this is not a foreign adversary, then we have to make the assumption that it's a U.S. citizen that's operating these. Because of that, they essentially need a warrant in order to wiretap these.
What?
Yeah.
Even with the Patriot Act?
That's the feedback I'm receiving. That's the legal limitation.
Come on. They don't even need a warrant to get into my phone. Get the fuck out of here. I don't buy that.
Well, whether it's the reality situation or not, that's how they're proceeding, right? And so to overcome that, there's like a 120-page report that needs to be filed all the way up to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States in order to even intercept these signals that they may or may not even be emitting, to be able to determine where they're going. And so I think that's one part of what's like slowing down this whole investigation. On the other hand, for base commanders, they have limited authorities to protect their base, but when they do, they need to submit basically a request all the way up to the Secretary of Defense. All right, so now you have this like super politically charged situation with a lot of risk of objects flying over the U.S. If they take action and shoot one of these down, even with the Secretary of Defense's permission, they're on the hook if that thing takes out a school bus or otherwise damages someone's property.
Or kills somebody.
Yeah.